And we're back with another episode of On the Record with Tiffany and Kevin. And it looks like I'm on my own today, no Kevin. So it's going to be me and Dr. Piper. I have a wonderful guest today, Dr. Doshie Piper. She is one of the two leads of the MLK Commission, and that commission heads the MLK Walk. Dr. Piper, thank you for coming on today. This walk is historical in that it's one of the first MLK walks and one of the three largest in the nation. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the walk?
Absolutely. And it's a march. And what we do is we march from MLK Academy to Pittman Sullivan Park to commemorate, imitate, and animate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King here in the city of San Antonio. And we do that the first or the second Monday in January, which is usually designated as MLK Day across the country, so that we will be reminded that as much progress as we have made, we still have work to do on behalf of justice, on behalf of equality and equity, and on behalf of inclusion. And we have several events leading up to the MLK March on January 15th.
What are the events leading up to it?
So on Friday, January 12th, we have the City of San Antonio MLK Commission events are kicked off by the BMU, the Baptist Ministers Union, with a worship service. And that takes place at Antioch Baptist Church on Walter Street. I believe it's Walter Street. And we do that because Dr. King was a Black Baptist minister. And so we've partnered with our Baptist Ministers Union to get the events started. And then we have our Youth Empowerment Summit, and Tyrone Darden is probably going to kill me when he watches this interview because the name changes. It's not Empowerment Summit this year. I think it's a Wellness Summit. And the reason why the Youth Committee has decided to work on wellness this year is because of all of the mental health and physical health, I'll say traumas and issues that have surfaced post-COVID that have kind of always been bubbling up on the surface pre-COVID, but really reared their head during COVID and post-COVID, being isolated and being confined to our homes. And so I know that he is focused on youth wellness on Saturday, January 13th. And it starts at 8 a.m. with a breakfast, and then they go into breakout sessions, and they have a speaker, and that's at Lockwood Park in the city of San Antonio. And then we have our first annual community celebration it's a dinner, and it's going to be at Child Safe, and it is to honor and celebrate all of our fundraisers that have made this event, our donors who have made this event possible, and our public awards winner. And so our fundraising committee and our public awards committee have partnered to put on this community celebration Saturday evening at 4 p.m. And this is the first annual, so we'll see how this goes. And then on Sunday, we have our wreath laying event, which is at MLK Circle, I want to say, which is right there at Houston and New Braunfels in San Antonio. And that is where our MLK statue is. And so we lay wreaths at MLK's feet in order to acknowledge his presence and to really kind of center ourselves on, doing this very tough work of seeking justice. And then we have an interfaith worship service on that Sunday at 4:30. So the wreath laying service ceremony is at 2 p.m. And then at 4:30 p.m., we have our interfaith service, which is headed by Judith Lackeritz. And that is, she's going to kill me. That's at St. Paul's Missionary Church, United Methodist Church, not missionary, but United Methodist Church. And that's down by St. Paul Square in Dignity Hills. Reverend Amerson is the pastor of that church. And so we'll have that.
I love him.
Yeah, that church service. And then we have our pre-March worship service that is headed by Bishop Rosa Wilson at the start of the march at 8 a.m. And then at 10 a.m., the march starts and we march from, again, MLK Academy down to Pittman Sullivan Park, really to embody the work that we need to be doing that day and the rest of the year and our lives, in fact, to really be intentional about working for justice and being people of integrity, good moral character, being kind, and really building what Dr. King will call the beloved community.
A community that includes everyone.
Correct.
And that, I feel like at this time in history, always in history, we need to include everybody. But at this time in history, when there's so much division.
Absolutely.
This is just a beacon for those of us who are seeking something greater, a better solution than what we've been given with the divisive rhetoric of today. It reminds, at least for me, I hearken back to what we know to be the historical truth of what was happening in the 60s. And before that.
Yeah, absolutely. Segregation and before that, Black codes, and before that, slavery. And, and I want to just kind of follow up with and reiterate that during this time, when things are so divisive, and I think it's important to note that Black Americans, African Americans, Black folk here in San Antonio only make up 7% of the population.
Yeah.
Latinos, Latinas, Latinx folk make up approximately 60-something%. And then we have whites who make up about 30%, and the other percentages are others, Asians and Pacific Islanders, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that because the immigration journey or story mirrors the slave story, that it is so important that we come together and share our common history, our shared history, in a way that I'm thinking back to the photo of Bloody Sunday before it became bloody, when they were all marching across that bridge, and it was really a rainbow of people. It was people that came from everywhere to march for voting rights, from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama in Mississippi.
I mean, when you look at this, at what we're doing here and at San Antonio, the makeup of San Antonio even really mirrors what Dr. King was longing for us to see people of lots of different backgrounds able to come together and live harmoniously and live where they want to live and do what they want to do. Now, we got some work to do on this, but this is a place that is the most reflective of the dream in this great state. I love the state of Texas. I feel like San Antonio is very reflective of what Reverend Dr. King was looking to do.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that because we are a city of majority minorities, and we are the seventh largest city in America, and we are very much leading the way in a lot of areas. I do know that, like you said, there's still much work to do on redlining to give living where you want to live a label or a name. But we've come a long way.
Yeah.
We've come a long way. And there will be, at the march, we do have lenders that will be marching. Frost Bank has registered. They're a sponsor. We have Broadway Bank that's going to be there. We have Randolph Books Credit Union that's going to be the Air Force Credit Union. So we do have some lenders, some bankers that are going to be there that, understands that they don't necessarily make the economic policies, but they can affect who they lend to.
I love Frost Bank because Frost Bank has really stood with Texas Kidney Foundation. Yes. They, if you look at the number of small foundations with big footprints and big visions that are making things happen, then you will often see groups like Frost Bank. Frost Bank has been very, very helpful in their funding and in their time, like helping us just think through the financial process. So now they're, and this is what Dr. King was looking at is people actually working together. It's one thing to have a system and force the system to bend to your will. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to get men and women to work together, to actually sit down and do what is right because it is right.
Absolutely. And let me say this, because I think this is important when we talk about equity. When approaching any lender, so since we're talking about Frost Bank, I'll use them as an example. They should not judge the Texas Kidney Foundation with the same criteria that they judge a much larger foundation. That is not equity. Because your operating budget is not the same. The services you provide individuals who are in renal failure, if I'm speaking correctly, are not the same, or their family members. And so they have to have equitable criterias for funding purposes based on the size of the organization, based on the work of the organization. And that is what we are really striving and working for, because that's justice. That's just, don't judge me with the same criteria that you would judge a larger foundation who has much more money in their operating budget and service many more people because they have the capacity to do so. Judge me based on a criteria suited for an organization of my size.
And that has been, and we experienced that being treated well by Frost Bank, by Bank of San Antonio. Now, that particular argument, Bank of San Antonio has really, like for Texas Kidney Foundation, we're a little bit different in that we, in the space of kidney disease, people really look at much of the money and the services have gone towards end-stage renal disease, like what you were just discussing, dialysis. What we do is early detection of kidney disease. Because we want to keep people from going down that road. Well, when we started doing this, lots of people all over the country talk about early detection and prevention. It is only a talking point for most of them. What we wanted to do was, at that time, I'd lost 9 family members to rare and chronic kidney disease. As of today, it's 16. I knew I couldn't stop this deluge in my family, but that I could stop it for a lot of other families. Absolutely. And I could navigate it and stop it for some of the ones in my family that are behind me, but that it would have to be done for every family. We'd have to provide it for every family. And they gave us the opportunity to do what we're doing, because a lot of people didn't even understand why we would want to find the disease early, why we'd want to give free screening, what you should be charging something. We actually had people tell us, well, y'all, what you need to do is charge something for it. And I was like, no, the people we're serving don't have the money for it. Anyway, I said that long story long to say that they looked at that and were like, okay, even though nobody's done this before, we're going to support you in helping you figure out how you're going to do it.
Absolutely. And if we look at the numbers, and I don't have the numbers, but I'm sure you have the numbers of who the disease impacts disproportionately is Black folk.
That's right. Black folk. Three times. Black people, you're right. We only make up 7% of the population, but we make up 36% of the people who have kidney disease. And we know kidney disease affects 1 in 3 Americans. So think about how many Black Americans are really being affected by this. It's disproportionately.
They don't even know it.
And they don't know it. So for us, like really focusing in on us was a priority. And there was no, at the foundation when we took over, people always think that I'm the founder, but I'm not the founder. I found the foundation. And they, at the time, had $13,000 in the bank and $11,000 in expenses against it. So they weren't in very good shape. But had a good heart and a good mission. They just needed some business acumen and some help fundraising. But the concept of finding the disease early and of concentrating in communities that were in need was a good concept. It was the building the relationships that hadn't been done, and so we started doing that. But the idea of giving away free testing, people balked at that because we had to go get the money to give the tests aren't free. We had to go buy the test and get the money to give the tests away. But it has been a game changer in a lot of ways for the people that we serve, not just for those few families that we've met and that we've served. We've done over 20,000 free screenings throughout Texas, and that's a significant number, but it's a drop in the bucket in comparison to the number of people who actually, just in Bexar County, who actually are affected by kidney disease. So our goal was to create models and to show people, hey, this can be stopped. This is how we can do it. And we've seen success with that. Like we just saw Medicare, one of Medicare's companies duplicate one of our models, which was the early detection test kit coupled with telemedicine to open up access to care. They just picked it up, and now it starts in the great state of Texas, and they're going to be taking it to their other service areas. So that's 2.6 million people affected by what we're doing. And that's what our area, that's what Black folks coming together, white folks coming together, Hispanic, Asian, all of our people coming together, that's what we produce. because we've had people of all backgrounds working with us who have just been about the work.
Absolutely. So you said something that really is the work of the commission is grounded and rooted in. Dr. King said that there are three evils in the world: poverty, racism, and he said militarism. Sometimes they say capitalism, but I put capitalism with poverty, so we'll say militarism. I think those were his exact words. And the fact that you say that when you start talking about free diagnostics, that was pushed back against that. And that's one of the things that we are working towards and on, because poor people or impoverished people, even if you have money, you still may be impoverished because of the way you think and the way you live. And I'm not going to the doctor because I don't want them to tell me no bad news. That's the reason why you need to go to the doctor.
Exactly.
But you know, like that's to us.
It's a mindset.
That's a poverty mindset, and so you know, we really try to focus on that. And I think that so we have 3 speakers this year, 3 dynamic speakers this year that are going to do what we want to call a triple threat. And one of them, Mari, I want to say Copen. I don't know if I'm mispronouncing her last name, but she's known as Miss Little Flint. Like when a Flint water crisis happened, and that's a majority. And so when we talk about demographics, Flint, Michigan is a majority Black city. Still this day. And I don't want to get all into the horrors of the whole water crisis. But what I do want to talk about is this 8-year-old child had enough exposure to advocacy and education to write the president of the United States to talk about environmental racism, because that's what it was. You reroute water from Detroit back to Flint that you know is contaminated, that you know is bad, and you know, and I don't know if they knew. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if they knew that Flint pulls their water from this particular water source, this particular lake, river, wherever it was, that had contaminated water from Detroit in it, and they didn't have the filtration services in the city because it's a poor city, it's an impoverished city, and she brought nationwide notoriety to this crisis. And so she's going to be one of our speakers at the march. We have a commemorative program that runs from noon, because the marcher should get to Pittman Sullivan Park by noon. And Mia Morris, who's our commemorative program chair, has put on a dynamic program. And so how speakers work is the honorary chair, who is the City of San Antonio District 2 Councilman, Jayla McKee Rodriguez, works with the commission on recommended speakers. So we get a list of names, we vet the names, and then we vote on who we want the speakers to be. And these 3 came. Amari is one. Jerome Foster is another. He also works on environmental justice, which I think is so important due to climate change and due to all of if we think about weather patterns, just the past 4 years, what did we have a few years ago? Snowvid, El Nino, all of the weather conditions that we are experiencing because we are not caring for Mother Earth. And so Mother Earth is not caring. She's not being kind to us, but these things can be prevented. And so we are going to talk about environmental racism and then move to environmental justice. So Jerome Foster, he was on the White House Advisory Council. He's going to talk about environmental justice. And then Anya Dillard, who talks a lot about generational poverty and those kinds of things. She's an activist. She's young. All of these folk are young and really wanted to.
The next generation of activists.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because when you think about the civil rights organizing that happened during Dr. King's era, you know, it was led by young people. I mean, he was young. He was in his 20s when they found him, and and really was a face for the movement. And so all of our speakers are young folks. They're fired up. They have longevity on their side, and they are really doing work that is nationally notarized and that can be duplicated, replicated, scaled out, similar to the Texas Kidney Foundation model of early detection. But these are things that we can do now to combat generational poverty and to promote generational wealth and stop being such a consumerism culture and really think about where we are investing our resources. And so that's what Anya talks about, and really grounding and rooting that in economic justice.
And I thank you, Dr. Doshie, for Dr. Piper, for talking about that. You've been listening to On the Record with Tiffany and Kevin, and my special guest is Dr. Piper. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the MLK March and about what we expect the MLK Commission to do next.
Great.
Here on 9:30 a.m. The Answer, home of Conservative Talk Radio.